Hey, so today we are taking this basic rhythm and we're going to turn it into a drum fill that sounds like this. And if those two ideas kind of sound somewhat unrelated, that's a little bit the point, but we're gonna get into that later, trust me. The goal is to show you the process of taking a basic rhythm and turning it into a drum fill so that you can take any basic rhythm and put it through a similar process and come up with your own creative ideas at the drums. And by the way, this process is not unique to just me. I've had conversations with Benny Greb and Dan Mayo and a bunch of other drummers on my podcast about this exact kind of process. And there are also other drummers on YouTube like Mike Johnston and JP Bouvet and Steven Taylor who have also broken down similar processes in videos on their YouTube channels. All of your favorite drummers have some kind of system that they can plug in a basic idea and then mold and morph and mutate that basic idea into something that's creative and something that sounds like them. So the secret isn't what they're playing, the secret is how they got there. And the beautiful thing about a system like this is no matter what rhythm you start with, if you give me that rhythm, this lesson is going to show you what I came up with. But if I gave you that rhythm and let you run with it, you can run it through these same steps and you'll come up with something totally different, which will sound like you. And that's kind of the point. So there are 5 steps to this process. You can download the sheet music for this lesson in the description below, but let's jump into step number 1, which is just learn this basic rhythm. That rhythm is counted 3, up 4 E, 3, up 4 E, 3 E, and up 4 E, And as you're learning that basic rhythm, be sure to keep the sticking in mind. Pay special attention to that because that sticking actually isn't going to change throughout each of these steps. As we change stuff and add stuff, that sticking is going to stay the same. So the sticking is really important. That's why I included it on the sheet music. This is the part of the video where I tell you to subscribe and like and comment and do all those things. They're very important. They help the YouTube channel grow. So please do those things. Step number 2 involves us taking this basic rhythm we learned in step number 1 and changing 2 things about it. We're going to change the orchestration, which is where we play the notes on the drum set. And we're also going to change the articulation, which is how we play those notes, whether they're accented or unaccented or ghosted or what have you. So the first thing we're going to do is change the orchestration, and we're going to change the first 2 notes of the figure, and we're going to move them to the rack tom. And then we're going to play those last 3 notes as snare, kick, snare, and we're going to play those 2 snare drum notes accented. So this is how that would sound. Step number 3, we're going to take this new orchestration and we're going to add some 16th note triplets. So now we're changing the subdivision some of the fill is based on, and then it's also going to end up changing kind of the time feel because when you start messing with triplets, things start to naturally feel a bit more swung. So starting on the end of beat 3, we're going to play 16th note triplets. We're going to play them as right, right, left. The 2 right hands are going to be ghost notes on the snare drum, and the left hand is still going to be that tom that we were playing at the end of beat 3 this whole time. So even though we've added some 16th note triplets, it still keeps the final note of beat 3, that 3rd triplet partial, it still keeps it as a rack tom, which is going to feel, kind of very similar to everything else we've been playing. It now just has a slightly more swung feel because it's being played on the 3rd partial of the triplet, which pushes it back a little bit more. So here's how that would sound. For step 4, all we're doing is adding a floor tom on the and of beat 4. This fills up the empty space that we've had on beat 4, but in a way that feels a little more angular. If we filled this note in with something like a snare drum, I think the fill would sound a little more bland and a little more just cluttered. But because it's a floor tom, it still feels very broken up since we have a snare drum, kick drum, floor tom, snare drum. That's a very broken and angular figure as opposed to just like adding another snare drum in there. Here's how that would sound. And then the very last step is we're going to add 2 ghosted snare drum notes as 16th note triplets after the very first tom hit. And now this gives the fill a nice little bit of contrast. So on the first beat, we have a continuous sextuplet, which feels very round and rolling, which contrasts nicely to beat 4, which is this kind of angular snare kick, floor tom snare, very broken and jagged sounding beat 4. So within this fill, we have kind of both bases covered. Nice round rolling drum fill vibe with also the angular kind of jagged drum fill vibe, which gives you something like this.